So hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. As Kashin kindly introduced me, my name is Lalitya Dhavala and I work for McLarens Aviation in Abu Dhabi in the UAE. And today we're going to talk about what happens after an event, an incident or an accident, what the differences are. And I want to tell you a little bit about where McLarens fits into this whole thing. And as part of the presentation, I want to show you a couple of videos about TV documentaries. And we will see whether the TV documentary about aircraft investigation matches up with what really happens. The goal for me today is for you to walk away with an insight of what goes on after an incident or an accident, and also for you to know a little bit more about my work and our role as a McLarens company. So let's get right into it. Growing up, for me, and I'm sure for many of you, the only exposure we've had to aircraft accident investigation or incident investigation would be what we watch on TV, like a documentary from, say, National Geographic, air crash investigation, or we hear on TV, Mayday, 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 and that's all we know, and that's what we think is real. So when I started working with this company and I gained a little bit of experience, I thought, you know what, I'll revisit these videos and see whether it matches up with reality. So today I want to show you what I learned during this.
There is still no evidence why LAM 470 flew into the ground in Namibia. The investigation moves from the field to DAAI offices in Windhoek, Namibia.
Is this the last inspection?
Looks like it. They begin looking into the way Mozambique Airlines was maintaining the plane.
November 28th.
Day before the accident.
Everything seems to be done by the book.
The Embraer 190, purchased brand new just a year ago, has a spotless record.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with the aircraft.
So here they're saying there's nothing wrong with the aircraft. But what they've looked at just now in the video, at least, is just one page of document. So they've looked at the technical records of the previous day, and they've checked that maintenance was done all right. And they've looked at one slide of the aircraft records. But in reality, it won't be just one page. It would have tens of thousands of documentation to confirm the serviceability of aircraft before an incident, and all that will be reviewed by the investigators. And also, the records can only tell you so much about the status of an aircraft. Sure, there was nothing wrong with the aircraft maybe before the day of the incident, which would have to be established after reviewing all the documentation. But even so, something may have occurred during the incident on the day of the flight. And we wouldn't know that just by looking at the previous records. So normally, at such an early stage especially, investigators wouldn't rule it out entirely. Right, let's move on.
With no evidence of a mechanical problem, the team turns its attention to outside factors. They review meteorological reports from the day of the crash.
All right, Dennis, the data from Mon Weather Station is in.
Did bad weather bring down Flight 470?
Great. Why don't we start from the takeoff in Maputo?
The team scrolls through a series of satellite images spanning the duration of the flight.
Now, this is also quite strange that they've jumped straight into satellite imagery. Satellite imagery is really, really expensive to procure. And normally that wouldn't be your first port of call. Your first port of call would be the meteorological reports available for the different flight stations around the flight plan. Or they'd be looking at the pilot's briefing, and that would also include weather forecast for the planned flight route. So those are the documents they'll be looking at. And it can also be quite difficult to get satellite imagery for the exact time of the flight where the aircraft was at that position. And again, quite expensive to procure. So why would they jump straight to satellite imagery? So what I'm thinking is, instead of showing weather reports on a piece of paper that the general public wouldn't be able to understand, if they show us these satellite images, we can see those little clouds, and it's just easier for the audience of the TV show to understand. And, if I was doing an investigation of this size, I'd certainly be seeing more lighting in the room. It's such a dim lit room to review all the documentation they are doing.
Scattered clouds 3,000 feet throughout the flight, nowhere near their cruising altitude. What's the wind like?
Nothing stronger than 11 knots. So, no problem there.
With both the machine and the environment ruled out, investigators have only one more avenue to pursue.
Okay, let's look into the pilot records.
Again, they're saying that we've ruled out the machine, ruled out the environment. Like I was saying, they wouldn't rule it out at such an early stage. And then they're also saying that there's only one more avenue left for the investigators to pursue. Investigators would normally be looking at a whole range of different avenues and factors as to what may have caused the incident or the accident. They may be looking at the flight plan, they may be looking at external events that may have occurred, they may be looking at the pilot experience and pilot actions as well. But what happens is, in this video, they're showing as if reviewing the pilot records is one brilliant idea one investigator has had, or it's just an afterthought. But in reality, reviewing of the pilot records is actually quite routine in investigation. In fact, the authorities would immediately seize the pilot records or the aircraft records from the airline if necessary, and then they'll go through all this documentation in a very, very detailed manner. And they wouldn't just be looking at the very basics of the pilot hours, as you'll see in this video.
Were the pilots responsible for the crash of Flight 407? Investigators considered if the pilots of LAM 470 played a role in causing the crash.
Captain Hermania dos Santos Fernandez.
Born in Mozambique, 49 years old. Here we go.
I see nobody is making any notes of this investigative process. An official investigation is basically a documented review of evidence. Every piece of paper that you look at, every information that comes in, you have got to record it, and you have to provide your comments. The investigators will have to provide their comments in a recorded manner and present all their findings in a report. But in this video, nobody's making any notes. They're just passing bits of paper back and forth and having a verbal discussion only. Anyway,
how familiar was Captain Fernandez with the Embraer 190?
Positive rate.
You're up.
Now, this part is actually correct, and I'm sure pilots in the room would confirm that this is basically called a call and confirm. As part of previous incidents, and when the investigations were conducted and safety reviews were conducted, they came up with a concept of called crew resource management, in which one crew member would call out for an action based off a checklist that I assume they're following in this video. And then the other crew member would perform the action and confirm that that has been done. It's called a call and confirm. So that part is actually quite true, what they're showing in this video.
The team scrutinizes his pilot records. Captain Fernandez was not only well trained,
2,500 on the Embraer 190.
9,000 flight hours total.
he was a very experienced airman.
Again, here they're putting up the photos of the aircrew on the investigation, mapping board. That again wouldn't normally happen. There's no data to be gained from just looking at the faces of the crew. Instead, what the investigators would be looking at is the entire training records of the crew that were operating the flight on the day. So, they wouldn't be just looking at the total hours and leave it at that and call them experienced. They'd be looking at, for much more documentation, they'd be looking at the training records. When was the last training done? What was the status of the recurrent training? And, they'd be looking at whether the crew were involved in any previous incidents. And also, they will be looking at what the crew actions on the day, on the flight. So this data can be obtained from the cockpit voice recorder or the flight data recorder. And this will tell them exactly what the crew did on that day.
Investigators have exhausted all available avenues of inquiry and come up empty.
Again, as I was saying, they have not exhausted all avenues of inquiry. And they would just be looking at a lot more information than this. So from what I'm saying, I would say this is a very, very preliminary review, a very initial review, and they'd have a lot more documentation to look at and evidence to look at before they can say they've exhausted all sources of inquiry. Anyway, let's look at another video.
3:45 a.m. 2.5 hours after leaving Brazilian air control. Flight 447 still hasn't appeared on the radar screens in Dakar. They were slow to recognize, first of all, that the aircraft had gone missing. Senegal didn't sound the alarm very quickly.
Again, in most of these aircraft investigation episodes, you'll notice that they talk about aircraft missing or they've gone off the radar, or sometimes they'll show a flight going in cruise and it's all very quiet, and suddenly a little bit of turbulence comes, and then that ends up being a catastrophic event. That's quite unusual. Most of the events that are catastrophic will not happen during cruise. There are many incidents that will take place during takeoff or landing, but what you'll see on TV is they want to set up the drama of something very quiet changing into a very dramatic event.
Search and rescue operations scrambled to the last known position of the missing aircraft. In Paris, families and friends gather to meet the flight at Charles de Gaulle Airport.
Waiting for the aircraft flight 447.
Corinne Soulas is at home, expecting her daughter to phone. It's Caroline's father who rings.
Receive a call asking me which was the number of the flight, because he has heard on the TV or on the radio that the plane has disappeared. And I didn't know that. So I began to be afraid. And when I saw every text on the TV or hearing the radio, I became mad. I became mad.
And you'll notice, that the videos about setting up the drama, and they're trying to create the scene of what happened prior to the accident. But in reality, it's quite normal for people to go to an airport to pick up their family and friends. But in this case, there, in hindsight, we know that it was going to be sad for them. But it's very normal for people to go to the airport and wait for their loved ones. And, when we're waiting for their loved ones, I wouldn't normally be flicking through the photo albums to try and remember who they were. I would normally be excited for them to come. So, all this is trying to set up the scene for the catastrophe to come. And, one more thing I noticed in watching these episodes is that they'll follow the story of one person. They'll show you where they came from, why they were on this particular aircraft, and, what happened to them and how their relatives were affected. But again, it's so that you can empathize with the person. You can put yourself in their shoes and imagine what it would have been like for you if this incident had occurred to you or your loved ones. It's to build the drama.
Caroline
Of Caroline, it was not possible.
Within hours of the disappearance, Air France makes an announcement.
This is a catastrophe, undoubtedly. And we have lost an aircraft with 228 people on board.
Now, that part is usually true. Airlines will hold a press announcement or a press briefing shortly after the incident and give the information they know at that stage. And that usually needs to be done quite soon after the incident. And before, it used to be within a few hours. But nowadays, with the rise of social media, especially if it's not a catastrophic incident, passengers are filming videos from inside the aircraft and publishing them online. So airlines have had to step up and produce the information they know and make an announcement or a press briefing very, very soon after the incident, maybe within an hour of when it happened.
How can such sophisticated, expensive machine have such a large, profound loss of life?
There was a very strong hunger and need to know why it happened, both for the families and also for future safety.
With over 600 Airbus A330s in daily service worldwide, it's vital to find out what caused the crash.
In this video, they're trying to build a case for the investigation. They're talking about commercial angle about how many aircraft are in service. They're talking about a family angle about they need answers. But actually, you wouldn't normally need to build a case for investigating an accident like this. This would be stipulated in international aviation regulation, which would automatically trigger an official investigation if something like this happened. The ICAO Annex 13 puts specific responsibility on governments around the world and different authorities, civil aviation authorities around the world, to initiate an official investigation if you know that something serious has occurred like this?
The answers could lie in the plane's black boxes, but they are lost 2.5 miles down on the seabed. Aircraft 447 is now 7 miles above the sea and still climbing.
Going up very, very fast, the speed is decaying very, very rapidly. If you kept pulling back, then you'd increase the rate of climb to a point, and the speed would decay until you got towards the point where the aircraft stalled. And then everything changes very dramatically.
Now, what you've seen just now, you might think it sounds really dramatic, but again, this one's actually true. Speed decay and stall are very, very serious events and can happen very rapidly in quite in a dramatic fashion. So, this part is actually quite true, but you wouldn't normally have any background music that's designed to perfectly increase your heart rate as you're watching the video. That wouldn't normally obviously be there.
Now, at nearly 38,000 feet, Flight 447 starts to drop. As they near 2,000 feet, the aircraft's ground proximity warning system detects the ocean below, and a new warning sounds.
Hold up. Take brake. Hold up. Hold up.
The recording stops at 02 hours, 14 minutes, 28.4 seconds.
Now, again, the last part is pretty true. Nowadays, investigators are able to stitch together from the cockpit voice recorder and from the digital flight data recorder. They'll extract the sounds in the cockpit that were observed. They'll extract the voices of the crew, figure out what they were trying to discuss with each other. And also from the data recorder, you'll be able to understand exactly what actions were performed. So they'll be able to stitch all these together and produce a film, a realistic simulation that's not so different from what we saw just now. So that part's actually true. So as you can see, investigation is a complex process, and it would involve a number of parties, including McLarens. So we become involved when an incident occurs. And what we would do is we would provide advice. We'd provide advice to the operator, and this might be about press releases, this might be about recovery of the aircraft, repairs, whatever it is. We provide advice to insurers as well about how much the claim, how much the estimated cost might be for the repair. And we'll put all our comments in a report and we'll eventually provide that. We'll also be communicating with a large number of groups. That can be the operator, that can be the airport in which it occurred, and any authorities who might be involved, or even any third parties. What happens after an incident is actually quite well defined in international aviation regulation. And this would be contained in the ICAO Annex 19 or Safety Management Systems Manual 9859. It will very clearly detail who's responsible for what should be done immediately after an accident. And operators around the world are duty bound to report any incidents that occur to them, even if they're minor or major, whichever it is, they'll still be duty bound to report them to their local civil aviation authority. They will also have emergency response plans in place, and McLarens can be involved in these things. So this again will have details about who will go to the accident site and who will liaise with the authorities, what you might want to be doing after the event. And they'll also have periodic drills of their emergency response in which McLarens will be involved as well. You may also have third-party recovery agencies on site, and this can be again two types. You may have to recover the aircraft itself. If it's disabled and on the runway, then you may need technical expertise to remove it from the runway and allow the airport to resume their operations. Again, McLarens is quite experienced in this. Well, you'll go and normally assist the airline, or there may be specialist agencies who'd be able to do that for you. And if you have any injuries or fatalities, unfortunately, there'll be a medical agencies, specialists who are able to come in and help you out. And also, if you have any human remains, there are some agencies who would come in and specifically do that work for you. Airlines would also have what's called a family assistance program. It's basically to provide support to the families of those who may have been affected during the incident. And this is also dictated by regulation as to what you should have and what level of support you should be providing. And in fact, as we speak, the European Safety Agency is considering expanding this program to to provide to assist airlines to produce a more detailed program. And your regulation is one thing, but airlines can choose to go over and beyond what the regulation asks for in terms of family assistance. And lastly, lawyers will be involved in the process. They might be dealing with any claims that might come up, such as the passengers' claims or the airport claims, or even any third-party damage that may have occurred. We've even had sometimes in the past environmental agencies putting in a claim for contamination to natural resources or cleanup of natural resources. And again, lawyers will be appointed to deal with such things. Investigation is also governed by international regulation, and ICAO Annex 13 will detail who all will be involved in this process. So primarily the responsibility of the investigation will lie on the state of occurrence or country of occurrence, as we would normally know states to be. But they can delegate this to an authority that they think might be more appropriate under the circumstances. Other parties will also be involved. This can include the state of operator, which country the airline is from, or it can include the state of the lessor, the manufacturer, any original equipment manufacturer for occurring components, or even the passengers on board. Those states may also be involved officially in the investigation. But not all incidents will go through a major Annex 13 investigation. If you have a minor incident, then airlines will do an internal investigation as part of their safety management processes, and McLarens will be involved in this process as well to help the airline to figure out exactly what caused it and what they can do to stop this happening again. Oh, sorry about that. We also have different phases of flight, and not all events are massive catastrophic events. Especially in the pre-flight and takeoff area and in the approach and landing area, you will see that many of the incidents that happen on a more regular basis, but they're not all major. For example, we recently had this damage caused to the inlet caliphon aircraft by a baggage handling vehicle. The vehicle that takes all your suitcases and loads them onto the aircraft. So McLarens became involved in this incident because this baggage handling vehicle had come into contact with the aircraft and caused a big dent. So we assisted the airline to see what repair options were available and what they could do to get the aircraft back into service as soon as possible. And eventually we helped them present their claim to their insurers and get that processed as well. You might think this is a really small dent, but this one actually cost upwards of $500,000 to repair. We may also have some incidents from pushback tractors sometimes. In this particular one, the tow bar of the vehicle failed, and as it was connected to the nose landing gear already, the nose landing gear itself was able to twist and fracture, causing significant damage to the aircraft. You also get engine failure events sometimes, and this may be in flight, but crew are pretty well trained to deal with such events. They would normally divert to the nearest alternate airport or return to the airport from where they took off if it happened shortly after takeoff. Bird strikes are also a frequent occurrence, and this can be minor to major. In this particular one, you'll see I've picked a few incidents that are close to your area. In this particular one, the bird was able to sever the control cables of the main landing gear, leading the aircraft to just veer off the runway and go into soft ground. So from an airline's perspective, the first priority for them is to get the aircraft back into service, of course, if the aircraft is repairable. So they might use their own engineering teams to do this. They may get in a third-party MRO. This can be maybe a specialist MRO agency, or they can even ask Boeing or Airbus, the original equipment manufacturer, to come and assist. Again, the clients will be in a position to help them decide which way they want to go. They may do temporary repairs. They may just say, you know what, we'll do temporary repairs for just now and ferry fly the aircraft to their base where they have more detailed facilities available. Or they may even just do a permanent repair and leave it for a while. They may get a disposition for the aircraft to go back into service and remain in service for a while before completing permanent repairs at a more convenient time. This can be at a stage check, for example. So McLarens will usually sit down with the engineers of the airline and will review all the options available, and where possible, will assist them to select the appropriate work scope under the circumstances. So let me tell you about maintenance event that I've come across during my work. This is not normally something that you would see in the news, but definitely these kinds of incidents do occur. So in this particular one, the aircraft was going through maintenance in an MRO, and there were no passengers on board because it's a cargo aircraft, but there were 3 minor injuries on the ground for people who were working on the aircraft. but the engine damage was quite extensive. So what had happened is, you'll see here, the engine was being installed onto the engine and they were lifting the engine using the bootstrap. And what had happened in this particular scenario, the hoist chains had failed, and immediately the engine just tipped and fell to the ground and struck the ground, causing damage. So this, as you can imagine, this is quite an unusual event for an engine. And there was significant damage to it. So you can see the fan blades were able to rub against the casing. There was unknown damage through the rest of the engine, because this is the kind of shock loading the engine isn't designed for. So what happened is, the operator of this aircraft and McLarens, we sat down with the original equipment manufacturer, the engine manufacturer, and we talked about how this could be repaired. We also collected data for our own internal investigation on the site. So we looked at if any previous events had occurred at this particular shop, and we also looked at the maintenance records of the equipment being used. And when we did that, we found out that these hoist chains that were being used, the tooling itself, it had not been inspected or calibrated in a long, long time. So once the aircraft was repaired and done with, once the engine was repaired and done with, we were able to bring about a claim against the other side, against the repair shop, for negligent shop practices. Operators will also think about presenting an insurance claim after an event has occurred. And generally, the insurance team and the engineering team will work together, and they'll come to people like McLarens, and they may be asking for advice as to what their insurer may be looking for. And because we're familiar with this process, we'll be able to tell them about what their insurer is looking for. They may be looking for the most economical method of repairs, or they want the repairs to be completed in a reasonable time frame. So we'll put together all these facts and report to the insurers, and eventually the report is passed through the insurance market, and the claim will be paid to the airline. Now, I've been told that in the audience today we have many students, and you might be thinking, how did I get here? Right? So normally, as you can imagine, this job would require a lot of aviation knowledge and technical expertise. But my company decided to have a graduate route, which obviously I'm very grateful for. But how did I get this opportunity? I can tell you right now that this has a direct relationship with the Royal Aeronautical Society for me. When I was studying my master's degree, I started attending these events just like some of you are today. And one of these events, there was an opportunity available to be the branch secretary for the UAE. So I immediately took that up on a volunteering basis. And from 2014, I've been working for the society in a voluntary position, trying and organizing the professional development program. And I can tell you this has had direct benefit to me in my career. I've been able to meet a whole network of like-minded people, including my own manager, and I got to know about this job and this role through this process. And it has also helped me know many more people during the course of my daily job. Sometimes we would find someone, a new operator or a new person, that engineering company, and I'd be thinking, you know what, I know these people from the Royal Aeronautical Society meeting, so it's quite good to have that connection. So in summary, I hope I've given you today a little bit of an insight into incident accident response and what our role is as a surveyor company. And for the students in this room tonight, my message would definitely be to take advantage of memberships to associations such as the Royal Aeronautical Society or any other engineering society that may be appropriate for you, and really use your association with them, really use your time in here to network with people that you might want to be associated with or want to learn from, and volunteer where you can to get more opportunities. Thank you for listening to me. Back to you, Kasham.
Thank you for the insightful lecture.